Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. I hope you all enjoy it. I love staying up late and recording these stories. I had a lot of fun making this video, as I usually do, so I hope you all enjoy it. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 500 likes on this one. I think if everybody took just a quick second, we could definitely get there. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post videos just like this one all of the time. Also, we just passed our 10-year anniversary of Slumber Reads, which is wild. We've been doing this for a whole decade, and I plan on doing it for another as well. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. A couple weeks ago, I got a text from an unknown number. Your appointment is scheduled for 2:30 p.m., October 19th. Please arrive on time. No name, no details, just that. I figured it was a wrong number or some spam bot and ignored it. I'm not the type to book random appointments. My life's a mess of late rent and grocery runs. Not schedules. But the next day, another text. Reminder, 2:30 p.m., October 19th. Do not be late. It came at 3 a.m., lighting up my phone on the nightstand. I blocked the number. It didn't stop. The texts kept coming. Every day from different numbers, burner phones maybe, or spoofed lines. Always the same message, same time. 3 a.m. I'd wake up to my phone buzzing, that cold glow cutting through the dark, and my stomach would drop. I called my provider, but they said there was nothing they could do. Numbers weren't traceable, no pattern to pin down. I stopped sleeping right, started double-checking my locks, even though I live on the 4th floor of a crappy apartment building with a broken buzzer. Paranoia, sure, but it felt like someone was watching me screw up my own head. October 19th feels almost like yesterday. The text stopped that morning, and I thought it was over. I was exhausted, strung out on coffee and nerves, but relieved. Around noon, my boss called me into work. Extra shift. Cash I couldn't say no to. I'm a line cook, and the kitchen was a blur of grease and yelling. I didn't notice the time until I glanced at the clock while scrubbing a skillet. 2:28 p.m. My chest tightened. I told myself it was nothing. Just a coincidence, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. At 2:30 sharp, the power cut out. The kitchen went dark. Lights, vents, everything. Dead silence. Then the sound of something heavy hitting the floor in the back room. My coworker, Javier, swore and grabbed a flashlight from under the counter. I followed him, my sneakers sticking to the tile. Heart thudding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The back room's where we keep the walk-in fridge and extra stock. Cramped, cold, no windows. The flashlight beam caught stacks of boxes. Then the fridge door cracked open. Javier muttered, "What the?" and stepped closer. That's when I saw it. Something was smeared across the door. Thick, dark, like oil, but redder, wetter. Blood maybe, but it didn't smell right. Sharp, chemical, wrong. Javier reached for the handle and I grabbed his arm. Told him to wait. He shook me off. Called me a baby and pulled it open. The fridge was empty. Not just no meat. No crates. Empty like it had been gutted. Walls bare and gleaming. Too clean. In the center, on the floor, was a folded piece of paper. My name was written on it in block letters. Javier laughed, nervous, and said, "Someone's messing with you, man." I didn't touch it. I couldn't. My legs felt like they were sinking into the floor and every breath tasted sour. He picked it up, unfolded it, and his face changed. Went slack, pale, like he'd forgotten how to blink. He dropped it and bolted, didn't say a word, just ran. I should have left too, but I looked. It was a photo of me taken from above, like a security camera shot, standing in my kitchen at home. I was holding a knife staring at the counter, but I don't remember it. I don't own a knife like that. Long, serrated, stained. Written across the bottom in the same block letters. You were late. The power kicked back on then, and the fridge was normal again. Stocked, cluttered, no blood, no paper. I stumbled out, told my boss I was sick, and left. Javier didn't come back either. His phone's off and no one's seen him. I got home, checked every corner, found nothing. But my kitchen counter had a fresh scratch, deep like something sharp had dragged across it. I haven't slept. I keep hearing footsteps above my apartment, slow and deliberate, even though I'm on the top floor. My phone buzzed at 3 a.m. again. Rescheduled, April 6th, 2:30 p.m. Be on time. That's today. It's 1:45 p.m. now. I'm sitting here typing this because I don't know what else to do. I can hear someone moving upstairs again, pacing, stopping right over my head. My hands are cold and my stomach's a knot. I don't know what's coming at 2:30, but I know I can't run from it. If I don't post again, check the news. Look for me. Please. Sometimes I think about a photo I saw when I was a kid. A photo that used to terrify me. I can't quite remember what was in it anymore. But the fear it stirred in me was so real, so sharp that even now, years later, a flicker of unease returns whenever I try to recall it. It's strange how something you can't even picture can still haunt you. One rainy afternoon I visited my Uncle Ryan, who still lived alone at 42 in the same house he'd grown up in. The place had a quiet, museum-like stillness to it, full of untouched memories. I remembered hearing from our family about how his teenage girlfriend, Elise, had drowned during a summer trip when they were just 17. He never really dated anyone seriously after that. As we sat in his living room, sipping tea under the soft hum of a table lamp, I caught sight of an old photo album on the shelf. A chill passed through me, sudden and inexplicable. Something about the album tugged at a deep, buried fear, like the feeling I got when I try to remember that photo from my childhood. It's not my uncle's girlfriend that was in the creepy photo, wasn't it? I mean, his girlfriend looked sweet and charming. As we finished our tea, Uncle stood up and carefully cut a tiny slice of the lemon cake we were eating. He placed it gently on a small floral plate, then opened the fridge and set it on the top shelf, right beside an old glass jar with dried roses inside. I watched, puzzled. Saving some for later? I asked lightly. Uncle smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. It's for Elise, he said softly. She always loved lemon cake. I like to leave her a little something, just in case she visits. His voice held no irony, just quiet conviction. I felt a strange tightness in my chest, and that old forgotten fear stirred again, like something was just out of sight, was beginning to step closer. I stood and stretched. Mind if I look around? I haven't seen the house for years, I said, forcing a casual tone. Uncle nodded, gesturing vaguely down the hallway. Of course, go ahead. I stepped into one of the newly painted rooms, a quiet, softly lit space with pale green walls and a fresh scent from the polished floorboards. I wandered toward the window. As I looked out, my breath caught in my throat. Someone quickly showed up in front of me from outside the window. Its head tilted slightly and it was smiling, but there was something wrong with the smile. It was too wide, too fixed, like it didn't belong to a living person. I blinked, and in that split second, the figure was gone. I backed away from the window quickly, heart thudding. What makes it more disturbing was the fact that I'm in the second floor. I hurried back to the living room, trying to keep my voice steady. Uncle, I just remembered. I've got to head out. I totally lost track of time. Uncle looked up from his chair, surprised and a little hurt. Already? You just got here. Stay for dinner, at least. I was going to make Elise's favorite stew. That name again. My skin prickled. Next time, I promise, I said, grabbing my bag and slipping on my coat with shaky hands. A week passed and the image of the smiling figure refused to leave my mind. Sleep came in fits, my dreams flickering with half-formed faces and waterlogged whispers. Eventually I gave in to the pull of the past and called my mom one quiet evening. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. Do you remember that old maroon suitcase? The one that had Uncle Ryan's photos and sketches? There was a pause on the other end. That thing? It's in the attic, I think. Why? I just want to look at something. My mom sighed, a soft rustle of worry in her voice. That suitcase contains a lot of valuable stuff to your uncle. Just handle it with care. I promised her I'll be careful with it. It was time to face whatever had been waiting in the dark corners of my memory. The attic smelled of dust and old wood, thick with the weight of forgotten years. I found the maroon suitcase tucked behind a stack of broken displays, dusty chest, and yellowed, ripped magazines. My hands trembled slightly as I unlatched it, the metal clicks echoing in the stillness. Inside, the familiar scent of paper and charcoal greeted me. I sifted through them softly, cautiously, until my fingers paused on a worn piece of cardstock tucked between 2 pages of a sketch pad. There it was. The photo. At first glance it looked innocent, an old black and white snapshot of my uncle's backyard taken from a window. But as I adjusted my eyes, I saw it. In the far corner of the image, half concealed in the shadows near the fence, was the same smiling woman I saw from the guest room window. Elise. The grotesque, rotting, drowned face of Elise. My breath caught, but I didn't look away. I turned the page in the sketchbook next to it, and my heart thudded loud in my chest. It was one of Uncle's drawings. Rough, frantic lines in heavy pencil. A woman with a drowned, sunken face. But what made me gasp was her neck. Its long and impossibly stretched, reaching up along the side of a house. Her face peeking through the second-story window, looking like a pale snake dipped in black mud. I suddenly understood. The fear I carried since childhood wasn't just from the photo. It was from seeing that face once before, through the very same window when I was just a little girl. Elise had been watching over us. I think something most people can relate to is the odd paranoia of sleeping at a grandparent's house in the middle of nowhere. The nights are so quiet and eerie. It always feels like something is watching you just outside of your field of vision, but close enough for you to see movement in the peripheral. When I was a kid, I used to frequent my grandparents' house on a large wooden estate in some rural mountains. There were always stories that a man had died in that house, but who knows if that's even true. These days, I don't remember much about those nights, but I do remember always seeing some being outside the door to the room I would sleep in. It would sit on the roof and look in from the top of the door frame. It would just sit there and watch. It would be gone by sunrise, but there would always be mysterious puddles of liquid where it hung. For the longest time, I convinced myself it was just childish superstitions. Nothing more than my younger brain making me see things. Recently, however, I got the chance to revisit the old house, and those memories of that thing just pried at my mind. My grandparents both died years ago, and their house was simply left to rot away. I was passing through that area and decided to stop in the little town nearby to relive some childhood memories. I wish I just kept driving. I used to head into the town with my grandparents just to look around, grab something to eat from the local diner at the corner. There wasn't much to do, but it was quaint and I enjoyed it. Driving through the town now, though, everything just seemed so off. There was a strange whistle as the cold wind blew through the town, lifting up the snow on the sidewalk. The old diner had closed down and was left abandoned on the corner. There weren't many people walking around the main road, which was odd considering that place used to be quite busy this time of day. But it had been years since I visited. Maybe people just moved away. I don't exactly blame them. Like I said, the town was quaint and generally felt disconnected from the world. Some found it peaceful, others lonely. I took one of the back roads leading towards the house. The sun was setting at this point. The dense forest on either side of the road was getting darker and colder by the minute. On the side of the road was a ripped open deer. It had been freshly killed. I guess nature never sleeps. It was about here I got a strange chill through my entire body. It felt like tons of tiny pinpricks were stabbing me across the entire body. I started to see eyes in the trees and heard whispers in the wind. I started shaking, despite the fact the inside of my car wasn't even cold. I considered turning around, which in retrospect was what I should have done, but I felt something pulling me back to that house. I pulled into the long, winding driveway and slowly made my way up to the front of the house. It was in shambles. Parts of the roof had fallen in, some of the windows seemed broken into. The door was ripped off its hinges in an unnatural way. What the hell? I thought. Had someone robbed this place at some point? I stepped out of my car, and the frost whipped my skin. The cold dark felt ever encroaching. I could barely see 25 feet in front of me, the only source of light being my dim car headlights. Those went out and I was left in a freezing blackness that consumed me. I heard voices in the trees all around me, beckoning me toward them. I switched on my flashlight and started to walk up to the house. The porch creaked with every step. There were tons of holes in it, and familiar claw marks were all over it and the broken door. My heart stopped. Was there some animal inside? Whatever it was, it had to be long dead by now. The house was silent except for my paranoid breathing. I took my time looking around. After all, there were plenty of memories to be reminisced on. I would cook with my grandma in the kitchen. I was never too good at it, but I was young and nothing really mattered yet. My grandpa would show me his hunting rifles in his trophy room. Stuffed deer heads lined the walls. Back then, they were all marks of a great huntsman. Now, they just felt creepy. Their dead, beady eyes staring into me. A noise from the kitchen. The hairs on my neck stood up. Something was inside the house with me. I picked up one of the old guns and prayed to God it still worked. I slowly peeked around the corner of the doorway, staring into the abyss of the darkened kitchen. I couldn't see much, but it was impossible to discern actual movement from anxious mind tricks. I closed the door and waited in the trophy room a bit. Footsteps. I put my ear up to the door. They were right outside it. My heart dropped and I could feel it pounding in my throat. A sweat broke out on my forehead. They came up to the door and then slowly trailed off into the distance. I waited a good 15 minutes just listening to the silence to make sure the coast was clear. Someone or something was definitely inside with me. I finally gathered up the courage to peek through the crack in the door. Nothing, at least as far as I could tell. I slowly creeped out into the main room, shotgun pointed out directly in front of me. At this point, my heart was pounding inhumanly fast. My entire body was shaking, due to the cold or the fear, I wasn't sure. I should have left then, but I had to check one last thing before I did. Either way, it seemed like whatever was inside had left. I couldn't hear any noises anywhere in the house. I came to the stairs leading up to the second floor. I had to look in the room I used to sleep in one last time, just for nostalgia's sake. I still had the shotgun in my hands, although I relaxed a little now. There were only 3 rooms on the second floor: my grandparents' bedroom, my guest bedroom where I stayed, and the upstairs bathroom. I didn't care much to look anywhere else but the guest room. I had spent so many nights there. The room had been ingrained into memory. As I began to step towards it, I heard another step above me, in the attic. My heart started beating again. My skin was littered with goosebumps. I had to check. I pulled down the old ladder and slowly made my way up it. I stared into the darkness of the attic. I couldn't see my hands in front of my face, but I could hear something. Not 30 feet from me, something was eating something. I heard bones crunching and flesh being torn. I turned on the flashlight and pointed it towards the sound. There, now staring directly at me, was whatever creature I used to see those late nights when I was a kid. It was completely real and physical. It was a bony humanoid creature. Its eyes were a piercing white, its skin a disgusting pale, and its teeth rotting and razor sharp. Blood dripped from its mouth, and I saw it was eating a dead deer corpse. It let out a nauseating screech that caused me to fall down from the ladder. If it hadn't been for how panicked I was, it might have got me. I screamed and scrambled back to my feet. I ran and tried to shoot the thing. The gun didn't even work. I ran to the only place I could think to stay, the guest room. I ran inside, the door fallen off its hinges. I got a second to catch my breath, and realized I had no idea where that thing was. My mind was racing, my body was violently shaking. I tried to think of where it could have gone. Then I remembered how it used to sit on the ceiling. I peeked up at the ceiling, and sure enough, it sat. Claws sank into the roof, just waiting. It wasn't able to come into the room. I tried to possibly think why, but I couldn't come up with anything at the moment. I couldn't walk outside the room. I couldn't jump out the window, lest I wanted to risk an injury from the second floor. Plus, that thing would probably run out after me. I looked around for something to use. There was nothing there. I opened the closet and I screamed as a corpse fell out from it. It was rotten and old, and I vomited on the spot. This was a person who had died here years ago, probably because of the creature. And this was why, I assumed, the creature couldn't climb into the room. His corpse held a small vial of an unknown substance. It looked like some kind of powder or incense. Some strange concoction that kept that thing away. It made sense to me now why that creature never entered all those years ago. That man's body was always in the closet. I just never bothered to look inside. My shaky hand picked up the vial and sprinkled some out into the hole. The creature screeched again, causing me a pounding headache. This stuff kept it out, and that's all I needed to know. I've now been sitting in this room for 2 hours. That thing hasn't left. No matter how much of the incense I sprinkle out into the hole, the dead corpse is still rotting next to me, and I'm still freezing in the darkness. I don't know what to do. I'm going to have to leave eventually, but I don't want to become the thing that's the source of the liquid dripping from the ceiling. I'm in need of some advice, but I don't even know what kind of help I should be after. It started about 3 weeks ago. I got a call from my mom on a cold Monday. We talk often enough, and a phone call from her isn't a strange occurrence at all. The only real strange part about it was that it was while I was on the clock at my job. I'm a nurse, so she usually would only call if something was important. I picked up the phone, fully expecting to hear that someone had died, only to be greeted by her familiar, gentle voice. She was casual, sweet, just asking about my day. Don't get me wrong, I love my mom, and I like talking to her, but I was at work and it was a very busy day. I tried to politely excuse myself and get back to what I was doing. Before I could hang up, she said something that caught me off guard. "I'm glad you're sleeping better. You looked so peaceful." I was caught a bit off guard by this. You see, I'm in my 20s and I've lived alone for almost 7 years now. What's more, my mom lives about 200 miles away from me. I didn't think much of it at the time, but as the day went on, for some reason, it bothered me more and more. After my shift, I called her again, and again she began a casual, cheery conversation with me. What she said earlier was burning into my brain at this point, so I asked her what she meant by that. Without missing a beat and in the same happy tone, she told me, "Well, you've been tossing and turning. I was just happy to see you sleeping peacefully last night." I didn't know what to say. I asked her if she was making a joke. Her response sounded just as confused as I was. She told me she had tucked me in last night. I didn't want to start an argument. My mother is not young, and there is a history of degenerative brain disease in some of our family. I was worried that maybe she was sick. I changed the topic again to her day and finished what turned into a relatively pleasant conversation. Given the earlier confusion, I texted my brother immediately. He lives in the same town as my mom and told him to check on her. Ever since then, I feel like I've been losing my mind. At first, I began to notice the smallest things. Tiny instances that aren't as they should be. That day when I got home, for example, the chair at the head of my dining room table was pulled out too far. I could have sworn I tucked it in, but reason tells me I must have forgotten. My bed was made when I knew for a fact I didn't make it. It was folded and tucked under the mattress, the same way my mom did it when I was little. I called my brother. I had no idea what was going on. Maybe my mom had come to visit and was pranking me. It was unlike her, but what else could this be? He told me that he had just had tea with her. It's been getting worse and worse. At night, I can hear footsteps, but when I get up to look for their source, they vanish, leaving me questioning if I really heard anything at all. A few nights ago, I woke up around 3 in the morning to the sound of humming. It was faint, barely audible, but I recognized the melody instantly. It was the lullaby my mom used to sing to me when I was little, the one she hummed when I had nightmares. I froze. It was coming from my bedroom doorway. I couldn't bring myself to look. I just shut my eyes and lay there, stiff under the covers, trying not to breathe too loudly. Eventually, the sound faded. When I finally worked up the nerve to turn on the light, the room was empty, but the closet door, which I always leave open, was shut. I've been calling her during the day, but it's no use. She either denies any of it, or simply speaks as if nothing was wrong. More often than not, she goes off on tangents that frustrate me to no end. I even recorded our last conversation, thinking maybe I could catch something, some slip, some change in her voice that would make sense of this. But when I played it back, the audio was crystal clear. Too clear. There was no background noise at all. No ambient hum, no shuffling, no clink of her spoon in her teacup like there always is. Just her voice, bright and cheerful, telling me she was proud of me, that I looked so calm now. I hadn't told her I was recording, and yet, right before the call ended, she said, "You should stop doing that. It's not polite." I've grown paranoid. I don't sleep in my bed anymore. I've taken to sleeping on the couch instead, but without fail I wake up in my bed, neatly tucked under the covers. Last night I stayed awake as long as I could. I thought if I could catch it in the act, I could prove to myself that this wasn't just in my head. I don't remember falling asleep, but I remember waking up, and I remember the hand that pulled the blanket over me. It wasn't hers. It was colder, thinner. The fingers were too long, and they didn't tremble the way hers used to. When it touched my forehead, there was no warmth, just a kind of pressure, like it was memorizing me. I kept my eyes shut. I don't know why. I think I thought if I looked at it, it would look back, but it knew I wasn't asleep. I can't explain it, but I could feel that it knew. It leaned closer. I could feel it, the weight of it pressing into the mattress beside me, slow and deliberate. The sound it made was low and wet, like thick saliva pulling apart in strands. Something dragged across my cheek. Not fingers this time, something softer, frayed at the edges. Hair, maybe. But it smelled like meat left too long in the sun. Then it spoke. You don't cry anymore, not like before. Its voice was trying to be hers, but it wasn't right. The words came out broken, halting and slow, like someone reading phonetics off a cue card. And underneath it, something else breathed, something heavier, labored, excited. I opened my eyes. There was nothing there, but the blankets were rising and falling beside me like someone invisible was still lying there, mimicking my breath. The indentation in the mattress was fresh, deep, and smeared along the pillow next to mine was a thick, dark streak, brown-red and rotting at the edges, like old blood mixed with dirt. When I looked back at the mirror, there was something sitting on the edge of the mattress. At first, I thought it was her. The hair was the same length, same part down the middle, but it was patchy, thin and coarse in some places, clumped like wet straw in others. Tufts were missing altogether, exposing skin that looked stitched, like burlap pulled too tight over something that wasn't a skull. It tilted its head again. The motion was jerky, like a puppet on tangled strings. Then slowly it began to turn. I didn't want to see. Every instinct screamed at me to look away, but I couldn't. The face that met mine in the mirror was trying to be my mother. It had her eyes, at least. It had eyes where hers used to be, but they were cloudy, too wide, like glass marbles pressed into soft clay. The nose was flat, crushed like something broken and reset wrong. The mouth was the worst part. It stretched too far, like it had been cut at the corners. The lips were split and scabbed, peeled back in a permanent smile that showed rows of tiny baby-like teeth. Dozens of them. Too white, too clean. It was brushing its hand across the pillow, slow and tender. And then it looked up, not at the bed, at the mirror, at me. And it smiled. I backed away from the mirror, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself think. I didn't want to see it anymore. I didn't want it to see me. But I couldn't look away. The thing on the bed tilted its head slowly like it was curious. Then it raised one long shaking arm and waved. I turned. Nothing was there. When I looked back at the mirror, it was gone. The bed was empty again. Just rumpled blankets and silence. I stood there for a long time, barely breathing, too afraid to move. And then my phone rang. It was my mom. Her voice was soft, calm. "Don't be scared, sweetheart," she said. "We just miss you." He was only gone for 2 days. Said he needed to clear his head, so he packed light and headed up into the Uintas with his usual gear. No big deal. He's done it before, but this time, when he came back, something was off. It started with how he walked in. No announcement, no "I'm back," just opened the door, set his pack down, and stood in the kitchen like he forgot what it was for. I was at the table mid-bite. He looked at me and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good trip?" I asked. He nodded, still smiling. That smile didn't drop once the whole night. Not when he told me about the mountain lion tracks near his campsite. Not when I noticed he was wearing my sweatshirt. The one he hates. Not even when I asked what trail he took and he said North Ridge. There is no North Ridge. Not here. That night I couldn't sleep. Something about how he moved felt wrong. Too smooth. Too studied. At one point I got up to check the locks and caught a glimpse of him in the hallway mirror. He was just standing in the dark staring at it. Not at his reflection, at the space beside it. The next morning I found a dead bird on the porch. Not torn apart, just laid out neatly. Like a gift. He said he didn't put it there. Then he asked if I remembered when our mom died. The thing is, she's still alive. I waited until he went out back. He said he wanted to feel the sun, but just stood in the middle of the yard, arms hanging loosely at his sides, face tilted upward like he was trying to remember what warmth felt like. That gave me maybe 10 minutes. I went straight for his pack. It looked normal at first. His knife, half-used water bladder, trail snacks he didn't touch, but when I unzipped the bottom pouch, I found something he would have never brought home. A lock of hair, tied with red thread. Dry, brittle, not his color, not mine. It looked old, like it had been buried in salt or ash. Underneath it was a scrap of parchment, something drawn in charcoal, rough circles layered with jagged lines, stick figures warped around a central shape. I didn't recognize the symbol, but the longer I stared, the more I felt like I should. When I turned it over, a single word was scrawled in the corner in tiny, frantic handwriting. Return. I barely had time to zip the pack shut before I heard the back door open. He stepped inside, eyes still fixed on the ceiling like something might be living just above it. "You been in my bag?" he asked calmly. I lied, said no. He smiled. That smile. It stayed frozen while he poured himself a glass of water, gulped it down too fast, then poured another. His throat made no sound as he swallowed. Later that night, I woke up to him humming, a song we used to sing when we were little. Only half the melody was wrong. Notes bent in places they shouldn't bend. The words didn't rhyme anymore. And when I peeked down the hallway, I saw him standing at my bedroom door, back turned, not moving, just listening. He didn't say anything when I asked what he was doing. He just walked away. In the morning, he was already at the kitchen table when I got up. No coffee, just sitting. He looked at me with that too wide smile and said, "Why'd you lie, little brother?" He asked why I lied. I didn't answer. I just stood there, heartbeat hammering behind my ribs, wondering how long he'd known. If he saw me touch the pack, if he'd ever really turned his back at all. He didn't press the question, just smiled and went back to staring at the table. Later, he left again. No word, no jacket, just walked out into the tree line and vanished like he'd always belonged there. This time I didn't check the pack. I waited, and after midnight, he came back. His hands were covered in dirt, shirt torn, no blood, just wrong. Like it wasn't made for his body anymore. Like his limbs had started to stretch beneath the seams. He didn't say anything, just walked past me and went straight to the basement. That's when I heard it. knocking. But not from the door, from inside the pack. Slow, wet, rhythmic, like knuckles dragging against plastic. I opened it. The first thing I saw was the hair again, matted now, damp with something dark. Beneath it, something wrapped in a tattered gray cloth. I should have stopped there. I didn't. I reached in and pulled it free. It was a jar sealed with wax and twine. Inside was a mouth. Not a full face, just a mouth, twisted in a silent scream. Gums torn back, lips stitched closed with animal sinew. But it was breathing. The glass fogged up every few seconds. It was trying to speak. Then I realized something. It looked like mine. I dropped it. The jar didn't break. It just rolled to the edge of the floor and sat there vibrating softly. Then from the basement, his voice called up. Except it wasn't really his. It was mine. Low, hollow, almost like he was trying it on for the first time. "Why'd you go through my things, little brother?" I didn't answer. I was too busy watching the jar. It was smiling now. Back in my early 20s, I worked at a small radio station as the nighttime radio host. The station itself was in a small town about an hour away from Las Vegas. KRT3 87.4 FM was our station name. Not particularly noteworthy or catchy sounding, but our signal only really served the small town surrounding one side of Vegas, so it didn't need to stand out. Despite that fact, we had a small yet dedicated listener base and played mostly old country songs. Some mornings when I'd go to the local diner for breakfast after my shift, I'd talk with some of the old-timers that liked to tune into my evening broadcast. They'd usually give me music suggestions or things to talk about for my next show. Needless to say, it was a great gig, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. The pay was okay, but it honestly wasn't a lot of work, and it got me by while I figured out what I wanted to do with my life. With that being said, there was one incident at the station that made me quit for good, and to this day I still have zero idea as to what actually happened that night. For context, our station was a small brick building about a 30-minute drive outside of a very small town. Altogether, the total population had to have been somewhere around 600 people, so the community was very tight-knit. We were situated just off the main highway, and it wasn't unusual to see a few cars pass each night, but you never really saw any people whatsoever. The land across from the station was bare desert for miles and miles, and the same could be said for the surrounding land as well, with the exclusion of a few small mountain/foothill ranges and a Native American reservation approximately 80 miles north of the station. Now with the scene set, let me share with you one of the most horrifying nights I've had in my life. It was late August, probably around 6 p.m. I was an hour into my shift and my coworker, who was the daytime host, had stayed a bit later with me so we could do a segment/debate about the local mayoral election coming up. Super boring stuff, but our average listener base consisted of old farmers and ranchers who ate up local politics. We finished up and segued into the first music block I had carved out for the night, allowing my coworker to gather his things and get ready to go home. "Alright, I've got my keys, got my bag. Should be everything," my coworker mumbled to himself. "Oh, and are you still okay to come in an hour and a half earlier tomorrow to cover me? I'm sorry to do it to you, but my dog cannot miss her appointment at the vet. She's getting old, you know." I never was able to sleep well anyways, and the little bit of overtime would help with some bills. So I had readily agreed. Yeah, man, of course. Don't worry about it. I'll be here for 3:30 p.m. sharp. Just don't forget, you owe me one. I jokingly jabbed back at him. Yes, yes, I know, I won't forget. Anyways, I gotta run. See you tomorrow, dude. My coworker replied back as he clumsily stumbled his way out the door towards his car. With a slam of the door and a turn of the key, him and his car motored off back into town, leaving just me at the station. I had about 50 minutes left of the uninterrupted music block I started, so I decided to break out one of the books I had in my desk and then head to our small kitchen to put a pot of coffee on. I managed to get about 3 chapters of Death is a Lonely Business and 2 cups of coffee down before it was time to interject with my weather update for the day. It's another lovely evening here in town name, with temperatures sitting around 91 degrees Fahrenheit as the sun is setting. Nothing but clear skies on the radar, so get out there and do some stargazing tonight. Anyways, coming up next, we have another solid hour of nothing but solid gold country hits. Starting off with a great one from Hank Williams. This one's for you, Ray. Ray was one of the old-timers I talked to at the diner often. He had requested a certain album that morning, so of course I had to dig through all our vinyls to see if we had it. Which we did. As I dropped the needle onto the groove, I was startled by a sharp succession of knocks at the station door. It caught me off guard as nobody ever really shows up at the station, unless it's someone in dire need of help, or maybe my coworker turning around because he forgot something. I recalled an incident the year prior where a stranded motorist had shown up at the station at night seeking help, and thought maybe this was the case again. I got up as my next block of music started and went to peer through the peephole of the door to see who was there. There was a guy on the other side of the door, probably in his late teens or early 20s. Slim build, average height, possibly Native American or Latino with dark black hair, dark brown eyes, and was wearing a tan plaid shirt with a pair of dirty jeans and well-worn cowboy boots. I decided to open the door to greet him and truly caught sight of just how bad he looked. He was disheveled and looked exhausted with his eyes sunken back into his skull and beads of sweat pouring from his face. Hey man, are you alright? Do you need something? I asked him. He looked back at me for what felt like almost entirely too long before replying in a low, almost hushed voice. My car broke down. You got a phone? The station did indeed have a landline, so I brought him inside and led him to the phone. There's a directory book hanging on the wall beside the phone. Town's not too far from here, and I believe the service stations offer towing services. Why don't you just give them a call and I'll grab you some water, man. You don't look too good. I told the man as I went to the kitchen to get some water and simultaneously make a fresh pot of coffee. He nodded but didn't say a word. I returned down the hallway with a glass of water and found him sitting at my coworker's desk. His back was to me, sitting absolutely pinned straight in the chair with his arms resting on the chairs. Here's that water, man. Were you able to get a hold of the folks at the service station? I asked as I set the water down on the desk in front of him. I received no reply to my question. Instead, he kept his gaze focused out the window beside the front door. I went and sat in my chair across from him. Yet again he remained silent, but picked up the water and drank it all down in one continuous motion, before sitting the glass back down on the desk. I found his lack of any real conversation a bit strange. But then again, I had no idea how long dude had been out there exposed to the elements. It could get up to 110 degrees Fahrenheit during the day, and that kind of heat can kill you if you're not prepared. I thought he's probably just severely dehydrated and beyond exhausted. How far away did your car break down? I asked. He stared at me for what felt like an uncomfortably long time, before raising his finger towards the east and saying again in a hushed tone, "About 5 miles." He looked like he had walked about 500 miles to get here, not just 5. So I was a bit confused on how he looked as disheveled as he was. Nonetheless, I wasn't here to judge. "Hey, that ain't too bad. At least it wasn't 100 miles away. Kinda lucky you were close to here. Well, just sit tight for a bit. I'm sure the tow truck will be along within the next hour or two. I've got coffee brewing right now if you want some." Again, he didn't utter a word and just turned his head to stare out the window. The sun was starting to go down, casting a deep orange glow onto his face. I took it as a silent acknowledgement and jumped back into my reading for a bit, neither of us moving from our positions for the next 30 minutes, and nobody uttering a single word in that time. Checking my watch, I saw I had about 10 minutes before introducing the next music block, so I got up to get more coffee. The guy was still staring out the window as I passed by. I'm not even sure if he blinked once in the time we spent sitting there. He just kept his head to the side, staring out the window. Grabbing 2 mugs, I poured us both some coffee, but being the klutz I am, I managed to spill mine. I spent a few minutes cleaning everything up before heading back out to my desk with mugs in hand. My coworker's chair was empty. I sat the 1 mug I poured for the stranger down on the desk and looked around for him. Walking briefly to the hallway, I noticed the bathroom door shut and figured he was probably in there. I was a bit confused as I never heard anyone stand up and walk down the hall, but didn't really give it a second thought. I set my coffee down at my desk, dropped into my chair, and popped my headphones on just in time to interject my commentary before the next hour of music. KRT3, with yet another hour of uninterrupted music coming up. Next, starting off with a great album from the Charlie Daniels Band. But before that, I'd just like to say, even though we are heading into fall, make sure you and your vehicle are prepared to face the heat of the desert if you're headed out. It's better to be over-prepared rather than under-prepared. Swapping out the last vinyl for the next while, I gave my spiel. I put the needle down just as I finished my last sentence. Taking off my headphones, I picked up my book yet again and began reading, totally forgetting about the stranger who was still in the bathroom. It wasn't until 45 minutes later, after I finished my 3rd coffee and really needed to pee, did I remember he was still in there. I half rushed down the hall and went to knock on the door with a, "Hey, sorry man, but..." when the door pushed open as soon as my hand met it. The bathroom was empty. The stranger was gone. Now, there were no windows in the bathroom. If you were to leave, you'd have to walk out of the bathroom, straight down the hall, and then turn left right past my desk to go out to the front door. So if he left it at any point, he would have walked right past me as I was sat there reading. Of course, I was beyond puzzled at this, but I did really still have to pee, so I did my business. I washed up and came to the conclusion that maybe I was just mistaken. Maybe the tow truck had gotten here early, and he left and I mistakenly thought he was in the bathroom. It still didn't explain how I never heard anyone leave, though. Upon drying my hands off, I walked back out to my desk and then stopped dead in my tracks when I rounded the corner. There at my coworker's desk was the stranger, sitting in exactly the same way, still facing out the window, as if he had never moved from the chair. I was very weirded out, but I like to consider myself a rational and level-headed person, and reasoned with myself that there had to be some sort of explanation for where this guy went. So I asked him, "Hey man, I thought you left. Where did you go? Did the tow truck come by yet?" Nothing. Not a word from this guy. At this point, I was just wondering what the hell his problem is. I didn't want to come off as bigoted, but I thought that maybe he just didn't speak English very well. I mean, he didn't seem like a threat. He was just really weird. I don't know. The kind of vibes I was getting from him were indescribable. Maybe he just went outside for some fresh air or something. It's pretty stuffy in here anyways. Not a big deal, I thought to myself. I was feeling a bit tired from not sleeping particularly well the previous day, and just chalked things up to my brain jumping at shadows. I decided that another cup of coffee might be a good idea to regain some brain power. I grabbed my mug and noticed the stranger's mug was also empty. "I'm grabbing some more coffee. You want some?" I asked. "Yes." The reply came almost instantly, in a deeper voice than mine, a stark contrast to the hushed tone he had used earlier, but I welcomed it, seeing as how he hadn't spoken a word to me since he initially showed up. With both mugs in hand, I went back to the kitchen. I emptied out the old grounds and filter and replenished the water before loading the machine with more coffee grounds. I decided to make a full fresh pot, seeing as how I'm tired and obviously the stranger likes the coffee, even if he didn't say much to me. Upon flipping the switch to start the brewing process, I turned and headed back to my desk as it would soon be time for my next commentary and the next album. He was gone. Again. Now I know for a fact that this time I didn't hear anybody get up and move around. No footsteps, no noises, no opening and closing of doors. Nothing. Yet he just disappeared. I checked the bathroom. The door was wide open and empty. Nobody was in the studio at the desk. Nobody was under the desk. Hell, I even checked in the desk for some reason. Nothing. Nobody was in the kitchen and nobody was in the storage room. That's the entire studio. And this stranger had just vanished. I walked back over to my desk and slumped into my chair, feeling half fearful and half bewildered. My mind was now going in circles, trying to figure out what the hell was going on here. I must have sat there going back and forth over possible scenarios for a good 5 minutes before I realized the record I had been playing ended, and it was time for commentary again. Still shaken, I picked up my headphones and tried to think of something to say. KRT3 here. We may be having a few technical issues here tonight, so I do apologize for any of our late night listeners. To make up for it, I have a special record up next. From one of my personal favorite artists, here's Waylon Jennings. As I changed out the vinyl, I was again startled by a sharp succession of knocks at the front door. Just as I dropped the needle, I scooted back with my chair and dropped the headphones on the desk, sitting and listening. We kept a .22 caliber rifle nearby the storage room just in case. It was a small town in the desert with lots of farms and ranches around. Not uncommon for most people to own firearms. And without thinking, I made my way over to grab it. With rifle in hand, I grabbed a few bullets from the box of ammunition stored next to it, and made my way to the front door. If this was the stranger out there at this point, I didn't care. Now I was looking out for myself. I peered out the peephole in the door and scanned what little of the surrounding area I could see. It took my eye a bit to adjust, but I could just barely make out a figure standing back away from the door. I could not tell who it was, though, since the blinds on the window were still open. I carefully shuffled over to my left and leaned my head over to see out of it. At this point, it was fairly dark and I couldn't see all too well, with the faint glow cast by the two outside lights mounted on either side of the front door. But I could make out someone standing there, approximately 20 feet from the door. It shared the same height as the stranger, but I couldn't make out any discernible details. I strained my eyes to look a little harder when a giant thud hit the door. The sound was so violent and so unexpected that I screamed and fell back onto the floor. Still clutching the rifle, I brought it to my chest with one hand and used the other to slide myself backwards. pushing wildly with my legs until I was up against the wall. Though my hands were shaking hard, I raised the rifle to the door and shouted, "I have a gun. I don't know who the hell you are, but you need to leave before I start shooting." My warning, however, went unheeded, and the door shook again with a crashing thud. I kept my composure as best I could, and kept the rifle trained on the door, ready to start letting off rounds. Thud, thud, thud. It repeated about every 20 seconds. After I don't even know how many times the front door was hit, my adrenaline hit a peak and I squeezed the trigger. A single shot rang out and pierced through the door around chest level. I quickly cycled the bolt and let off another round, hitting the door again not far from where the first round hit. Then there was silence. As the ringing in my ears lessened and my heavy breathing slowed a bit, I stood myself up and kept the rifle trained at the door, cycling the bolt for a new round just in case. I didn't want to chance opening the door and getting jumped by something or someone in case I missed, so I slowly worked my way over to the window where I could see if anything was sprawled out on the ground. When I was finally able to get a clear line of sight outside, I was horrified to see absolutely nothing. No person, no animal, nothing. My blood had run completely ice cold at this point. My rational brain had all but completely shut down, and I was now entirely submerged in fight or flight. Thud. The crashing noise started up again, but this time from the opposite side of the building. Like I mentioned earlier, the station was a brick building. The only possible way a noise of that magnitude would be possible is if you took a pickup truck and hit the wall with it going at least 20 miles an hour. Thud. Something hit again from the roof this time. Thud. Again, the front door shook. At this point, I was turning in circles trying to decide where to point the gun next. It was like I was being surrounded, and boy if I wasn't severely outnumbered. I slung the rifle on my back and made a quick dash down the hall toward the storage room. Turning and slamming the door once inside. Thankfully, this being a storage room, there were some decently heavy file cabinets along the wall. I managed to slide one in front of the door to block it off before turning and slumping myself down against the opposite wall, grabbing and pointing the rifle at the door at the same time. The loud thudding continued for some time before blending into what sounded like a symphony of fists knocking on every inch of the building. I was beyond frightened. I was trapped in this small room, and though I did have something to protect myself with, I didn't even know what I was up against. I had never experienced anything even remotely close to this in my life. I sat there with the rifle and listened as the symphony of knocks dwindled to just a single knock at the front door, before stopping altogether. Obviously, I didn't trust that whatever was out there was gone for good, so I waited about an hour, according to my watch, before even thinking of leaving the confines of the storage room. Pushing myself up off the laminate floor, all my muscles ached and my body felt heavy. Once my fight or flight wore off, I just went back to being completely exhausted. No amount of caffeine could help me now, but I knew that I still had to keep my wits about me and stay vigilant. Even though I had only fired the gun twice, I grabbed another handful of bullets from the box and shoved them into my pocket with the others. Better safe than sorry is a great principle to live by. I stood in front of the door and took a couple deep breaths to steel myself. I just need to get to the phone. I can call the sheriff and get them to send everything they've got. It'll only take a minute. I can do this. With those thoughts in mind, I pushed aside the filing cabinet and readied my weapon. 1, 2, 3. I threw open the door and brought the rifle up to both my hands immediately. I could see across the bathroom. It was empty. Slowly working my way out, I peered right towards the front door and then left to the kitchen area. Everything was as it should be, nothing in disarray. The chair to my coworker's desk was pushed in neatly. The The kitchen still faintly smelled of coffee, but there was this heavy scent that hung thick in the air through the whole station. I hadn't noticed until after leaving the storage room. This might show my true age, but whatever. It's the best way I can describe it. Have you ever rolled your spare change into those wrappers so you can take them to the bank? After handling all those old pennies and quarters and whatnot, your hands get this very distinct earthy/coppery/metallic smell to them. That is precisely what it smelled like in there. The coppery smell. The eerie silence only broken by the sound of the vinyl player's needle skipping over the record I had put on last. The whole situation was messed up like I was in the set of some horror movie. But unlike those movies, with their, quite frankly, brain-dead protagonists, I only had one mission in mind, and that was to pick up the phone and call the sheriff. So I did. After assuring myself the place was indeed empty, I slung the rifle back over my shoulder and made my way into the kitchen. I grabbed the phone off its receiver and started wildly punching in the number for the sheriff's office. A small sense of relief was starting to wash over me as the dial tone started to sound, but that sense of relief did not last long at all. Over the eerie quiet that had befallen the station, over the dial tone of the phone, and the skipping of the record player, there was another noise. The sound of the front door's hinges ever so slowly opening. Through everything that had transpired that night, not once did it cross my mind to even lock the front door, and in that moment, I had felt fear like I'd never felt it before. My heartbeat, which I could feel thumping so prominently within my chest, through everything had increased by so much I could no longer feel it, and I'm sure my face must have been whiter than a fresh snowfall. I forgot all about the phone in my hand. I dropped it. I had zero grip strength left in me. Turning slowly around to face the front door, I saw the stranger was back. He stood back face towards me in the open doorway, arms at his sides, unmoving. The sound of the dial tone went quiet. The skipping of the record player, however, kept a steady rhythm. The only thing that pierced the silence were the words the stranger spoke. I need help. Now about here is where things get foggy for me. After those events, the very next thing I remember is the deep orange glow of the morning sun beaming on my face, and a firm hand on my shoulder. Dude, what are you doing out here? Are you okay? Are you hurt? What's going on? It was my coworker. Apparently, when he rolled up to the station for work that morning, he saw something out in the open desert across from the building. My coworker wore glasses and all around just genuinely had terrible vision, so he kind of just brushed it off because he couldn't make out any discernible details. But after walking up to the now closed front door of the station and noticing 2 perfect bullet holes right through it, he became intrigued and quickly went inside. I was gone. There was a cold cup of coffee on my desk, and the needle on the last vinyl I played was sitting off the record, as if someone had taken the time to stop it from repeatedly skipping. He called out for me and checked every room of the station, becoming increasingly concerned when he could find no trace of me anywhere, and found the rifle missing from the storage room. He returned outside and walked to the road when he noticed the figure in the desert had moved closer. Just barely being able to discern its features now as a human, he started to walk towards it, forming into a sprint once he got close enough to notice it was in fact me standing out there. And that is where I woke up. I was standing in the middle of the desert, arms laid at my side, back pinned straight, just staring out at the horizon. My coworker brought me back to the radio station and phoned the sheriff, telling him the state he found me in, and about the bullet holes in the door. Apparently the sheriff station did get a call that night, but the operator hung up as there was nobody on the other end of the phone. I couldn't even speak for myself at this point. It was as if my mind had just completely broken, leaving me as a living, breathing shell of a human. Eventually, the sheriff and a couple deputies did turn up as well as an ambulance. Everyone tried to ask me questions about that night, and knew I couldn't tell anyone what I witnessed. They would have just labeled me as crazy, and locked me away in an institution or something. So with what little grip of my sanity I could muster, I spun them a short tale about some crazed drifter that tried to assault me that night. Obviously, they were a bit dubious about my story, as there was no blood from any of the shots I fired, and no sign that anyone else had been there with me that night. Hell, I learned later on apparently there wasn't even a second coffee mug found. Just the one I used. But as they had no other evidence to go off of, that is the official explanation for what happened to me according to the law. I stayed at the local hospital for a couple days so they could monitor me. The first day they loaded me up with Ativan, as I was still in somewhat of a state of shock and couldn't function, but ultimately I was released a few days later with a clean bill of health. I did briefly get a chance to speak with some of the locals I usually conversed with at the diner after the incident. They asked me how I was, and I reassured them that I would be fine. Ray, who was the one that specifically requested that Hank Williams album, would have been up late listening to my broadcast that night, so I asked him if anything seemed off about it, or if he noticed the dead air after I stopped playing music. He told me he stayed up a bit later after the music I played for him, as he was working on installing some new parts for his farm truck that night, but that he didn't notice anything unusual. Nobody else I knew caught my broadcast after about 8 p.m. I still don't exactly have an explanation for what happened that night. I remember years later learning about wendigos and skinwalkers and all the cryptids of the desert, but the coppery blood smell usually associated with the first two entities, but ultimately, I just don't know. I ended up moving to Canada a couple years later and no longer have contact with anyone back home. Most of my family is dead, and I really just don't have a reason to go back there. Ever since I left, I haven't experienced anything like that in my life ever again. Some days I still wonder if the radio station is still standing, and if anyone else has seen the stranger. But as far as I know, I'm the only one to come across him. That night left me with a giant mental scar I'll never truly be able to forget. If anyone has any ideas on what I might have come across that night, I would love to hear some suggestions, as I really don't have the faintest clue. Some roads feel like they remember you better than people do. We were driving back late, me, my girlfriend asleep next to me, and Havana, our 2.5-year-old dog, curled up on the passenger side like she owned it. The air was cool, the sky was moonless, the kind of night where the world seems to shrink down to just your headlights and your thoughts. The GPS had rerouted us off the main road to avoid traffic. I took the turn without thinking, but once we were a few kilometers in, it started to feel like the road had taken me. There was nothing memorable about it visually. Flat, straight, just trees on either side, and the kind of quiet that gets under your skin. But something about it started pressing on a part of me I hadn't felt in a long time. A pressure behind the ribs, a heaviness that wasn't about tiredness. That's when I saw someone up ahead. A man on the side of the road, not waving, not panicked, just standing there, calm. I slowed down, and as the lights caught his face, I nearly forgot to breathe. "Marco?" He smiled. "Hey, Peter." I pulled over, gravel crunching beneath the tires. Ivana perked her ears but didn't growl, just looked at him like he belonged there. I got out. Marco looked older, like me, but his posture was the same, relaxed but alert. He always had this way of noticing everything without needing to talk about it. I hadn't seen him since we were maybe 11. He was never the loud kind of friend. We didn't climb trees or build forts or throw water balloons at girls. We just talked, in hallways, On slow walks after school, we'd found each other because neither of us liked pretending to be interested in the things everyone else seemed obsessed with. I never played with Lego. He didn't play soccer. We found connection in the quiet places between everything. And this road, this one exactly, was where we used to walk together. After school, before the streetlights came on, it cut behind the newer blocks and curved near an old train yard that doesn't exist anymore. We used to sit on a cracked bench back there and talk about things that felt too big to say out loud anywhere else. Like where we'd be in 20 years. Like whether anyone would still remember us. Like what it meant to feel invisible, even when surrounded by people. And then one day, he was just gone. No explanation, no warning. He didn't move away in the way that kids usually do, with boxes and teary goodbyes. He just disappeared. Empty seat in class. No forwarding address. I asked once, maybe twice, but no one had answers. And I didn't push. I just let him vanish. Now here he was on this road again, like no time had passed. "I never got to say goodbye," he said. His voice hadn't changed. Still soft, still grounded. He looked toward the road like it was familiar too. "I didn't even know you'd left," I said. "I know," he said, "but you remembered this road." "I didn't mean to. But something in you did. You came back when you needed to. That's what this place was always for." I didn't understand what he meant. Not fully. Not yet. But he kept going. "You used to talk to me when no one else did. You let me be quiet without making me feel wrong for it. You asked real questions, and when my life was going to hell, you didn't even know it, but you gave me a place to be safe." I looked away. That lump in my throat was back. "You helped me carry something I didn't have words for back then. Now I'm here to return the favor." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what to do with the ache in my chest. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "No," he said gently. "You're functional." He looked at me like I'd said something untrue about my own body, like he was the scaffolding inside me for what it really was. "You've been unraveling slowly for a while," he said. "You show up, you get the work done, you hold conversations, but inside you're bone tired, worn down by the pressure to keep it together, and no one sees it, not the way I do." I didn't answer, because he wasn't wrong. I'd been going through the motions, delivering on expectations, solving problems, nodding along in meetings. But something deeper had been leaking out of me, something I hadn't told anyone about. That feeling like the floor could give out at any second. That brittle edge just beneath the surface of every task, every social obligation, every smile. "You've convinced everyone you're okay," he said. "Even her." He gestured toward the car. "But you're not." I felt something hot building behind my eyes. Then he glanced at the passenger seat. "She knows, though," he said, nodding at Havana. "She keeps you tethered. Every day, you think she's just a good companion, but she's more than that. She pulls you out of the fog, reminds you there's joy and safety, even in tiny moments." I looked at her through the window. She was watching me, tail tapping once, then still, like she understood every word. "You've got more strength than you give yourself credit for," he said, "but strength isn't the same as not needing help." "I don't know what to do," I said quietly. "You don't need to do anything tonight. Just feel it. Let yourself stop pretending for once. That's why I'm here." He looked back down the road, and for the first time I realized something. He didn't look like someone visiting. He looked like someone returning home. You came back now because you knew I was close to breaking. He nodded. This was our place. You were most you here. Before you learned to hide, I figured maybe if you came back, you'd remember how to come back to yourself. I took a step forward, but he was already backing away. Not vanishing, not disappearing, just walking into the dark, like someone leaving a room that wasn't theirs to stay in. I watched until I couldn't anymore. Then I got into the car. My girlfriend stared and squeezed my hand, still half asleep. Havana leaned gently against my leg with that quiet, solid love that doesn't ask questions. We drove. The road didn't feel hollow anymore, just quiet, real, steady. I don't know what Marco was. Memory, ghost, guardian. All I know is that I needed him, and somehow he knew exactly where to find me. That's the thing about the right kind of friendship. Even when time and distance tear it from the surface, something underneath remembers. A hidden map, a place. He came back to remind me I'm not alone in this, that I never really was, and that sometimes saving someone doesn't look like a grand act. Sometimes it looks like showing up on the side of the road, right when the silence gets too loud. I haven't told anyone this. Not my family, not my friends. I'm not even sure why I'm writing it down here. I guess I just need someone to believe me. Or at least to read this before it happens again tonight. It's been exactly 1 year since my younger brother Elias died. He was 3 years younger than me, but always seemed older, calmer, kinder, more grounded. Well, I was the loud one, the one who pushed boundaries. Elias was the type to read in silence, to smile without needing a reason. The cancer hit fast. Acute leukemia. The doctors didn't sugarcoat it. They gave us a few months, maybe, but in the end, it was barely 8 weeks. I spent most of that time with him. I helped him eat when he couldn't lift his arms, held his hand when he was too weak to speak, tried to joke around just to make him laugh. In the final hours, when he was barely there, he looked right at me, not scared, not sad, just knowing. "Don't stay alone," he whispered. That was the last thing he ever said. After that, everything shut down. There was a flat line on the monitor, a few soft words from the nurse, and then nothing. The world just stopped. I didn't cry much, not at first. I think part of me refused to believe he was really gone. I disconnected from everything. School, friends, routines. I slept all day, stayed awake all night, barely ate. I thought maybe the silence would help me process it. Instead, it left space for something else. The first time I heard his voice again, it was around 3 a.m. I hadn't been asleep, just lying there staring at the ceiling. The window cracked open to let in the late October wind. "Are you there?" It was faint, soft, coming from the hallway. I froze not because I was afraid, but because I knew that voice. I got up, opened the door, turned on the lights. Nothing. Every door was locked, windows closed, no sound except my own heartbeat. The next night it happened again. Same time, same voice. "Are you there?" I told myself it was a trick of memory, auditory hallucinations, lack of sleep. That made sense, right? But the voice kept coming back, every night at 3 a.m. sharp, and then the footsteps started. Soft, deliberate steps across the hallway floor, stopping just outside my bedroom. Never louder than a whisper, but impossible to ignore. Eventually I started locking my door at night. I played white noise, music, anything. Sometimes I'd fall asleep with a podcast playing just to drown it out, but none of it worked. The sound always cut through. Always him. Then came the knocking. 3 soft taps, then his voice closer now. "Please, open the door." It never sounded threatening, not angry or vengeful, just pleading, almost sad. I told myself I wouldn't give in. I wasn't going to open the door. I wasn't going to play into whatever this was. Grief, trauma, madness. But it didn't stop. Then it got worse. I started finding things around the apartment, objects I hadn't seen in years. Stuff I knew was in a box on the attic, sealed and forgotten. A small, worn-out toy dinosaur on the windowsill. His favorite. The one he carried everywhere as a kid. A half-drunk Capri Sun on the kitchen table. Wild cherry. The exact flavor he used to beg Mom to buy. Each day, something new. Each night, his voice. Like the past was leaking into the present, or something was trying to lure me back. Last night, I found his old diary on my desk. It had gone with him to the hospital. I'd packed it in his bag. He never wrote much in it, but it was something that brought him comfort. It never came back home with us. I'm absolutely certain of that. And yet there it was, dusty, locked, familiar. I opened it. Only one sentence had been added, written in a shaky but unmistakable hand on the last page. "I found a place for you." That's when I knew this wasn't just memory. This wasn't just grief. Something was actively reaching out. I've tried everything. I left town, booked hotel rooms, stayed with friends. I even rented a cabin hours away, in the middle of nowhere, and turned off my phone, but no matter where I go, at 3 a.m. I hear him, even when I'm awake, even when I know he can't possibly be there. And every night his voice changes, just a little, subtle at first, a slightly slower rhythm, a flatter tone, like a recording wearing down, like a mask slowly slipping. If it's really Elias, why does he sound less and less like himself with every visit? Tonight is the anniversary of his death, 1 full year, and I'm hearing him already. No waiting for 3 a.m. this time. He's early. I hear footsteps in the hallway, slower than usual, more deliberate, closer. Then the whisper, "Please, open the door." I shouldn't. I know I shouldn't. Every part of me screams not to. But something inside me is whispering that tonight is different. That if I open it now, it might finally end. That maybe I'll see him just one more time. That maybe it won't stop unless I do. I'm standing up now. I'm walking to the door. My hand is on the lock. I'm going to open it. You don't need to know my name. It's not important. And I know that I'm bad at writing, but I need to get this down before you follow in my footsteps and find yourself on that dirt road, leading to that place. Once you've entered, they don't let you leave. I should have listened to my gut when it told me something seriously sinister was hiding out in the dark corners and hallways of that horrible building. Something that I would come face to face with that very night. This was in 2017. My friends and I had done a lot of abandoned exploring as a group when we were still in high school. Mostly old churches, malls, and some crack houses that were usually inhabited by junkies shooting up, or homeless people needing a place to warm up for the winter. We would stock up on beers, spray cans, and whatever change we could put together between the three of us to buy some weed. It started out tame. We were just a bunch of stupid teenagers exploring old buildings, all while getting hammered and stoned in the process. We had a cheap handheld camera David got for a school film project we would use to record our adventures. Most of the footage was just our antics and vandalism we would do in these abandoned places, thinking it was the coolest thing at the time. Mark would even edit the videos during the week and post them in our group chat, and that's how we spent the rest of our summer, each abandoned place getting crazier than the last until we had seen it all in our town. One Friday night in November, David and Mark were at my place, where we would drink and smoke every weekend, thinking about the next place we would explore. We had already been everywhere in town, and it was getting repetitive. That's when we settled on the Elm Creek Health Facility, an abandoned mental asylum 45 minutes up north of town. We heard stories about kids exploring and going missing, but obviously, urban legends weren't holding us back from having a good time. David had a great-grandmother who was admitted there in the 40s because of her severe schizophrenia and manic episodes. Doing my research on the place now, it was famous back then for its inhumane experiments on patients, and was closed down in 1963 after many cases of abuse were reported. The facility was shut down, but the building remained. The rain battered down on the windshield of my car as we made our way north of the highway. I was 4 beers deep, and to sober up, I kept the windows rolled down in the pouring rain. We exited off the highway and made our way east towards the industrial side of town, where a dirt road led to the facility. That feeling I spoke about earlier was overwhelming me. A sense of existential dread, fear, and excitement washed over me as we turned into the dirt road, only lit by my headlights. The rain was still coming down heavily, only stopping when we were enshrouded in the tall and thick trees along the dirt road. We parked when we reached the no trespassing gate. Mark handed David and me flashlights, and we set out on the path to the building on foot. We joked about not making it out alive, as a means to project what we were feeling. We were all scared, but wouldn't admit it. Mark was on camera duty and started rolling as soon as the building was in sight. The building stood high in the sky, overgrown with vines and leaves, covering the boarded-up windows. We were lighting up a joint when we first heard the voice. "You guys exploring too? There's an entrance over here. Come here and I'll show you." The voice rang out in the cold rain, emanating from somewhere outside of the building. When Mark responded to the voice and said, "Yeah, we've never been here. Where are you?" No answer. We couldn't see where the voice had come from as we were still far from the building, so we just shrugged it off as another group of explorers. And maybe we would get the chance to see them when we got inside. We approached the building and scouted the perimeter for any entrance points we could find until we found an open window behind a grate. Mark kicked the grate in, and we descended into the basement of the building. The smell was the first thing that hit us. Mold and rotten wood. The room was full of graffiti, and medical instruments and books were strewn haphazardly around the room. Smashed beer bottles and cigarette butts littered the floor, and made it apparent that we were not the first or the last people to ever enter this building. We made our way out of the room and down one of the long and winding corridors, asking, "Hello, is anyone there?" To which we received no response. We brushed it off as maybe the group had left before we made it up to the building, even though we knew it wasn't possible, and we continued before Mark stopped us and said, "I heard this place has a room where they did experiments on patients. It would be sick to get on film. Let's split up. And if one of us finds it, call the others." Before I could object, he was walking down the staircase with the camera pointed at his face, talking to the audience vlog style. David was just as scared as me. But to look unbothered, He offered to take the third floor and let me explore the main floor on my own. I went room by room, shaking with nervousness and mentally documenting what I saw to tell the others later. When we were done, the feeling of being watched was enough for me to start calling out to Mark and David, to which I received no response. That was when I started running back towards the beginning of the corridor to where we had split up in the first place. That was where I saw him. Mark was standing in the corridor, back turned to me and not moving. "Mark, what? This isn't the time to joke around. I want to leave." He didn't move. A chill ran down my spine as the man turned around and revealed himself. It wasn't Mark. It was me. The man was a carbon copy of my face except for the soulless void of black in his eyes. His face twisted up into a grin. My body was frozen and I stared in horror as he mimicked me perfectly. "Are you lost, Jason?" I backed away slowly, tripping over garbage on the floor in the process. "Why are you trying to leave, Jason? They don't let you leave here, just like David's great-grandmother." I regained my footing and turned toward the staircase. I raced down the stairs towards the basement we entered, tripping and stumbling while trying to convince myself this was some sort of elaborate prank. That was when I heard him start to run. He chased me down the stairs and throughout the basement until I got to the room we entered. I halted across the lawn, not looking back even when I heard the distant shrieking of David and Mark. Trembling with fear, I got to my car, put it in reverse, and drove to a gas station 2 miles away. When I called the cops, a search party went to the facility to find David and Mark. They are still missing to this day. Every night in my dreams, I am in that building. If you ever find yourself on that dirt road, remember this. They don't let you leave. I noticed it first with my keys. I've had the same keychain since college. An old bottle opener from a bar I don't even remember going to. I never changed it. It's worn smooth from years in my pocket, the logo faded to almost nothing. But one morning last month, I picked them up from the counter and felt off. The keys looked the same, but they didn't feel right. The weight was off, like someone had swapped out the actual keys for copies. One of the teeth on my apartment key was shorter, slightly rounded, but when I tested them, everything worked. Door opened, mailbox too. So I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe I dropped them. Maybe something bent. That's how it started, though. Small enough that you think it's just stress. Work's been rough lately. Sleep hasn't been great, so you brush it off. Then the email came. It was a receipt for a coffee shop I don't go to, some indie spot across town. The charge hit my card around 8:42 a.m. I checked my phone's health app. At that time, I was in the shower. I remember being in the shower, but the receipt had my name, my card. Everything matched. I googled the cafe. They had a little online ordering system. You could leave a note for the barista. Mine said, "See you tomorrow." I started checking my accounts more often after that. There were more weird purchases. A small charge at a gas station I've never been to. A subscription to a language learning app. Someone ordered sushi at 11 p.m. on a Sunday. Something I never do. The kicker? They ordered what I might almost pick. Not my usual, but not something I'd hate either. I figured maybe my card had been stolen, but then why were the purchases so close? Too subtle to notice unless I was actively looking. And then my coworker asked how the concert was. "What concert?" I asked. She laughed. "The one you posted about on your story? Looked amazing. I never post stories. I barely post at all. I pulled up my account. Nothing there. But I checked my camera roll, and there were pictures. Low quality shots from the back of a crowd. A band I sort of like. Someone had zoomed in, tried to catch the lights, the stage, the vibe. The timestamps matched what my coworker said. Only problem? I wasn't there. I spiraled a little after that. Thought maybe I was sleepwalking, or maybe dissociating. I'd been stressed. Maybe I was blacking out, losing time. So I did what you're probably thinking. I set up a camera in my bedroom. Cheap webcam, motion triggered, just to ease my mind. The next morning I checked the footage. I never left the bed. But at 3:12 a.m. I sat up. I sat up perfectly straight, rigid, and stared at the bedroom door. Then without blinking I said, "You need to stop watching me." My voice, my face, but it didn't feel like me. I grew up in a house where pets never lasted long. Doesn't matter what we brought home. Goldfish, birds, a kitten once. They either disappeared or just died. Always in weird ways. Like there was this parrot we had. One morning he was chirping like crazy. Happy, loud. That night, dead. Lying stiff at the bottom of his cage. One wing bent in the wrong direction. Neck twisted like someone snapped it and forgot to finish the job. There were these little drops of green stuff around him. His eyes were wide open, staring up at the ceiling like he'd seen something. Something bad. And the goldfish? That night, I swear to God, they all floated up at once. Bodies stiff, mouths half open, stuck like they were still trying to scream underwater. If you watched long enough, it almost felt like they were whispering something. I didn't understand. I didn't want to. My parents acted like it was normal. Until one day they put cameras all over the house. They didn't tell me why. They just said it was for security. But the next morning, I caught them whispering in the kitchen. "Did you see it last night?" Mom asked real low. Dad didn't answer right away. Then he muttered, "It's reacting faster than we thought." Reacting to what? I remember standing there watching them. They smiled when they saw me like nothing was wrong. "Morning, sweetie. Breakfast's almost ready. Did you pack your school bag?" They always smiled too wide. A few days later, they took me to meet this uncle. I don't remember his name. I barely remember the drive there. I just know that halfway through talking to him, I started feeling tired, like heavy, like my bones didn't want to stay up. And then everything went black. When I woke up, I was back home, Mom and Dad standing over me smiling. From now on, they said, "You should write a diary every night. Write down everything you do, everything you think. Be a good boy." So I did because I was a good boy. At first the diary was normal, me writing about school, homework, dumb stuff, but then stuff started appearing in the diary that I didn't write. In red ink, things like, "You weren't polite to your teacher today. Don't sneak snacks after dinner." Sometimes there were drawings, little crude sketches of my room, of me. I thought maybe Santa Claus was watching, or some guardian angel. I tried not to freak out, but it kept getting worse. The diary started telling me about things that hadn't happened yet. "There will be a fire drill tomorrow. Don't panic." Guess what? There was a fire drill. Then it started telling me what to think, who to trust, who not to question. "Don't worry about where Dad went last night. He's doing it for you. Trust the process." process. By the time I was a teenager, I knew something was wrong. Very wrong. One night when my parents were out, I snuck into their room, found their laptop, found a folder on the desktop. Experiment number 12. Inside, hundreds of photos of me. Charts, brain scans, notes, all about me. There was one file I can't get out of my head. Subject 12. Neural restructuring at 60%. Dream function terminated successfully. Antisocial personality framework initializing. What was happening to me? I ran to the bathroom, looked in the mirror. For a second, I swear to God, I didn't recognize myself. My reflection smiled before I did. I grabbed a razor, sliced my finger. Green. The blood was green. And then behind me, Dad's voice. Calm. Too calm. You're almost one of us. I don't know how much time I have left. I still write in the diary every night, but now the replies come before I've even finished writing. Sometimes they tell me things I don't want to know. Sometimes they tell me things I'm about to do. And lately, the handwriting, it's starting to look like mine. So, you know those double-sided Q-tips you use for makeup application or cleaning out your ears? I discovered a sentient one. Let me start this off by saying I'm a 23-year-old female. I live alone in a decent-sized apartment in a fairly busy suburb. My name is Ava, but I don't think that's important to my story. Now, I'm sure many of you have bought Q-tips at some point in your life. I mean, come on. They're sold at practically every convenience store, at every Cub or Walmart or Walgreens. I'm sure when it boils down to it, there are very few stores that don't sell Q-tips, even if they're just the generic ones called cotton swabs. Well, my story begins a couple weeks ago, so let's start there. I was getting ready to go out and I grabbed a few Q-tips to help blend my makeup. Something about one of them felt, I don't know, off. Like there was this unsettling aura coming off of it that shouldn't be. Because it's just an inanimate object, right? I use it anyway, despite the odd feeling, like an idiot. As some eyeshadow smeared onto the cotton, the aura changed from unsettling to almost threatening. My body jolted and the Q-tip fell from my hands and onto the floor of my bedroom. I tried to put it out of my mind as I got ready, and as I'm about to leave the room, I grab it and throw it out with the others before heading out for a fun night with friends. When I get home and put my car keys on top of the cabinet by the front door, I jump. Sitting there, right beside my key dish, is a used Q-tip I didn't put there. As I take note of the makeup smudge, I realize it's the same one from earlier. I once again throw it away before heading to bed. When I wake up, slightly hungover, I see the Q-tip on my nightstand next to my cup of water. It looks like the same one, but that can't be possible, right? So now, whenever a smudged Q-tip shows up, I throw it out. But every time, it appears somewhere where I'm guaranteed to find it. To see it, on the bathroom counter, by the soap, sitting on the edge of the kitchen table, on my vanity where I get ready, and each time the Q-tip reappears, it's bigger. The growth was subtle at first, barely noticeable, but now it's around 5 feet. The plastic stick in the center is much thicker. There's far more cotton on the swabs. I can't throw it out anymore. Hell, it's kind of heavy. A couple days ago, when I woke up, it was in bed with me, under the covers, the aura still menacing. After doing my morning business in the bathroom, I headed to the kitchen to make breakfast. As I do so, I kid you not, I feel cotton brush against my arm, but it stings, almost burns. I turned around and there, right behind me, is the Q-tip, somehow standing on its smudged swab. I looked at the arm next, but figure there's no point, because there's no way a Q-tip could harm me, right? But when I looked down at my arm, where it brushed against me, not only is my literal skin smudged, I can see my bone. I screamed. Loud. It doesn't hurt though, so I pinch myself, figuring I must be dreaming. But I don't wake up. It's been a couple days since it smudged me, since I was first able to see my bone. I still can. It hasn't changed. My bone is still there, like the Q-tip just smudged everything off, leaving a round crater at the bottom of which I can see my arm bone. I'm writing this now because I need help. 20 minutes ago, the cotton of the Q-tip brushed up against my leg, and now it's like my arm. Skin that has seemingly been smeared away, just disappeared, but the bone is still there beneath the smudged away skin. I still can't feel any sort of pain, but I also know that this is real. And I don't know what to do. I don't know who to turn to, because I fear they'll think I'm crazy. What if others can't see my smudged away skin? What if it looks normal to others, even though the skin and flesh is completely gone, and they think I'm crazy and lock me up? I think it's going to slowly smudge me away, like I used to smudge my makeup. Does anyone know what I should do? This is both a plea for help and a warning. If a Q-tip seems off to you, whatever you do, don't use it. The first time I heard the hum, it was in the dead of night. Snow had blanketed the town in a heavy, sound-dampening hush, and the only noise in my house was the soft ticking of the clock on the mantel. I was drifting somewhere between sleep and wakefulness when it started. A low, mournful melody, barely audible but impossible to ignore. At first I thought it was the wind howling through the eaves, but this was different. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, rhythmic, almost human. I sat up in bed, holding my breath, straining to listen. The hum seemed to be coming from inside the house. My heart started to race as I fumbled for the lamp on my nightstand. But as soon as the light flickered on, the sound was gone, like it had been swallowed by the darkness itself. I told myself it was nothing, just a trick of a half-dreaming mind. But when I went to the window, I froze. There were footprints in the snow, starting at the edge of the woods and leading straight to my house. They stopped abruptly beneath my bedroom window, as if whoever, or whatever, had been out there had been watching me. The next morning, the town was buzzing with the news. Mrs. Avery, a neighbor 2 doors down, was missing. Her house was locked up tight, her car untouched in the driveway. The only thing anyone noticed was an odd sound, like faint humming, drifting around her property. Now I can't stop hearing it. The hum follows me everywhere I go, growing louder and closer, as if it's waiting for me to figure out what it wants. Or to take me, too. At first, I thought I was going mad. A sentient hum that wants to take me. It made no sense, but as the missing persons reports kept flooding the bulletin boards, I knew something had to be happening. On the 16th of August, the mayor held a press conference. I'm flipping through channels when I spot her familiar face on channel 7. I listen in. Madam Watson, what is happening with all these people? A reporter queries. We want answers. The mayor responds. There is an ongoing police investigation, and we are working hard to find your loved ones and bring them home safe. The camera zoomed in on the mayor's face. her calm demeanor faltering as the crowd's frustration erupted in a storm of shouts. "BS!" someone screamed from the back, their voice cutting through the noise. "You've been saying that for 2 weeks." The mayor's expressions shifts. She seems uncomfortable, like she's holding something back. I lay there, silent. The moon casts a soft shadow on the back end of my room. I drift away to sleep when suddenly I hear it. I can't pinpoint where it's coming from. It's like a surround sound speaker turned to the lowest volume. The hum is soft yet eerie. I stand up, listening closer. I still don't know where it's coming from. I decided to investigate, so I equipped myself with a flashlight and an old, dull kitchen knife. I hesitated at the edge of the woods, my flashlight beam barely penetrating the thick darkness ahead. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but the cursed hum, pulled me forward. It was as if I had no choice. The footprints continued well into the woods. Animals howling and snow breaking under my boots keep my mind off the god-awful hum in the background. Continuing, I see that the footprints veer off the trail into the denser, wilder area of the forest. As I pressed deeper into the woods, I felt the hum crawling under my skin. My head throbbed. My vision swam, and for a moment, I thought I heard my name woven into the melody. The footprints, almost unnatural in size, led me to a small opening. Inside was a quaint cabin, but it felt wrong. It looked ancient, yet new at the same time. The wood was plentiful with cracks, yet the hinges were freshly oiled. The door was slightly ajar, as though it was inviting me in. Stepping in the clearing, the hum was deafening. It smothered my mind in darkness. I raised my flashlight and stepped forward, the crunching snow becoming a haven from the hum. Then I saw it. Movement inside. I stood there a moment. Should I have gone back? I whispered to no one. I was in too deep now. I enter the cabin. The floorboards a symphony under my weight. I clear the cabin, but no one is inside. Looking deeper, I see musical instruments. A piano, its keys yellowed with age, an old 6-string with 1 string snapped, and a gramophone, gleaming flawlessly despite the state of the cabin. On the platter lay an aged record, its label faded. I extend my hand, now trembling, to pick it up, but the hum grows. It's no longer an organized melody. It's a scream. It's a fighter jet taking flight in my mind. I stumble back, my hands grasping, my head in pain. Something moves in the shadows, a flicker just beyond the reach of my flashlight. "No," I muttered, my voice shaking. I turned and bolted, nearly tripping over the doorway in my haste. The hum receded as I ran, fading to a faint, almost soothing drone that nestled in the back of my mind. When I finally stumbled into my bed hours later, the hum was still there, dormant but present, its rhythm a sinister lullaby. Sleep came, but peace did not. I stood in line in the mayor's office, humming softly under my breath without realizing it. The realization jolted me, and I clamped my mouth shut. When my turn came, the secretary gestured for me to enter. Inside, Mayor Watson sat behind a massive oak desk, her expression unreadable. "What can I do for you?" she asked. Her tone clipped. I dove straight in. "I need answers about the disappearances. The hum, what is it? I know you're hiding something." Her gaze sharpened, but she didn't react immediately. "That's a dangerous assumption." she said, leaning forward, and one I suggest you keep to yourself. I hear it, I said, my voice shaking. The hum, everyone who's heard it is gone. What's happening to me? Her face tightened, and for a moment, she seemed to weigh her words carefully. Finally, she sighed. My great-grandfather created it, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. A song. He wanted it to be perfect, but it became something else. It feeds on curiosity, draws people in. It always leads to the same place. The cabin, I said, the word falling from my lips like a stone. Her expression darkened. No one who goes there comes back, and every time it gets stronger. I shuddered, the hum growing louder in my mind, as if reacting to her words. She stood abruptly, her gaze hard. You shouldn't have come here, she said, her voice final. Leave, before it's too late. As I walk to the exit, the hum grows louder in my head, reverberating off my skull. I exit, trying to ignore the intensity. It continues back home. My body began to move on its own. I tried to fight it. My mind screamed for control, but my body no longer obeyed. Each step toward the cabin felt like sinking deeper into quicksand. Inescapable, suffocating. The hum swelled, a living thing coiling tighter around my thoughts. When I reached the clearing, the cabin stood waiting, its crooked frame illuminated by the pale moonlight. My vision blurred, the edges of reality folding in on themselves. I could feel it. The hum wasn't just sound anymore. It was inside me, rewriting me. The door creaked open as if it had been expecting me. The gramophone gleamed in the center of the room, its brass horn catching the faint light. My hand reached for the record, trembling but purposeful, as though it no longer belonged to me. When the needle touched the vinyl, the hum erupted into a symphony, haunting, beautiful, and devastating all at once. It was everything. Joy, despair, love, and terror, woven into a melody that consumed me. My body sagged, and for a moment I felt weightless, as if I were dissolving into the music itself. I wasn't alone. Shadows emerged from the walls, faint outlines of those who had come before me. Their eyes glowed faintly, their mouths moving in unison to the hum. I tried to scream, but no sound came. They weren't trapped. They were the hum. My vision faded, but I could still hear the song, now clearer than ever. It whispered promises, beckoning others. It wasn't just music. It was a message, a signal, and I was its newest voice. The next morning the hum began again, faint but insistent, drifting over the town. Another would hear it soon, another would follow, and I would be waiting.